The year is 60 CE, and the world trembles on the edge of transformation. In the misty hills of eastern Britain, where ancient oaks whisper secrets older than memory, the Roman Empire has planted its eagle standards deep into Celtic soil. For nearly 2 decades, the legions have marched across this island, their hobnailed boots crushing traditions that stretch back to the dawn of time. They bring roads and aqueducts, law and order, civilization as they understand it. But they also bring taxation and slavery, contempt and cultural annihilation. This is a land caught between worlds. In the great stone cities that Romans build, merchants hawk wine from Gaul and olive oil from Spain, while senators debate policy in marble forums that gleam white against the grey British sky. Yet beyond these islands of Mediterranean culture, the old ways persist. Druids still gather in sacred groves to read omens in the flight of ravens. Warriors still paint themselves with woad and charge into battle with songs of their ancestors on their lips. Chieftains still hold court in great timber halls, where bards recite genealogies that stretch back through myth to the gods themselves. The tension between these worlds has been building for a generation. Some British tribes have bent the knee willingly, seeing opportunity in Roman alliance. Others have fought and been crushed, their people sold into slavery, their lands redistributed to Roman veterans. A few have found a middle path, maintaining their independence while acknowledging Roman suzerainty, walking the dangerous tightrope between collaboration and resistance. Among these client kingdoms stands the Iceni, dwelling in the flatlands of what the Romans call the Eastern Territories. They are a proud people, masters of horse and chariot, keepers of ancient traditions that predate Rome by centuries. Their lands are rich with grain and cattle, their warriors renowned for their fierce loyalty and skill in battle. For years they have maintained their precarious independence through careful diplomacy and strategic submission, paying tribute to keep the legions at bay while preserving what they can of their ancestral ways. But this delicate balance cannot hold forever. The Roman appetite for wealth and control grows ever more voracious. What began as partnership increasingly resembles occupation. What started as protection has become exploitation. The Iceni find themselves strangers in their own land, watching helplessly as their young men are pressed into Roman auxiliary units, their grain requisitioned to feed distant legions, their sacred places desecrated by foreign gods. At the heart of this struggle stands a woman whose name will echo through the ages. She is daughter, wife, mother, and queen. She is diplomat and warrior, pagan priestess and political survivor. She is Boudica, in her own tongue, Boudica, meaning victory. Born into nobility, raised in the old traditions, married into power, she has spent her adult life navigating the treacherous currents of Roman-British relations, always seeking to protect her people while preserving their independence. You are about to walk in her shoes. You will experience the weight of royal responsibility, the agonizing compromises required for survival, the slow burn of watching your culture erode beneath foreign rule. You will know the intimate texture of political negotiation and the brutal reality of ancient warfare. You will feel the sacred connection to land and ancestors that drives Celtic resistance, and the terrible personal cost of choosing between accommodation and rebellion. This is not a story of simple heroism or clear moral choices. This is the story of a woman caught in the grinding gears of history, forced to make impossible decisions with the survival of her people hanging in the balance. It is a story of love and loss, of political calculation and spiritual calling, of the price that leaders pay when they choose to stand against the tide of empire. The Roman historians who recorded her story, Tacitus and Cassius Dio, saw her through the lens of their own civilization, sometimes admiring her courage, sometimes condemning her savagery. But they could not truly understand what drove her, could not feel the pull of Celtic blood and ancestral duty that shaped her choices. They wrote of her as an exotic curiosity, a barbarian queen who briefly threatened the edges of their rational, ordered world. But you will know her from within. You will understand the sacred obligations that bound her to her people, the spiritual traditions that gave meaning to her struggle, the personal grief that transformed a careful diplomat into an implacable enemy of Rome. You will walk with her through the halls of power and across the battlefields of rebellion, feeling each step of the journey that led from negotiation to warfare, from hope to desperation, from life to legend. Her story unfolds in an age when the fate of nations could turn on the decision of a single leader, when personal honor mattered more than personal survival, when the gods still walked among mortals and the thin veil between this world and the next could be pierced by ritual and sacrifice. It is an age of iron and blood, of poetry and prophecy, of fierce loyalties and implacable hatreds. The Romans believe they are bringing light to the darkness, civilization to barbarism, peace to a land of endless tribal warfare. But you will see through different eyes. You will see the forced conversion of sacred groves into military camps, the transformation of free warriors into taxed farmers, the slow strangulation of a culture that once flew free as the wind across these ancient hills. This is your world, your heritage, your burden. You are the last guardian of a way of life that stretches back to the mists of time, and you face an enemy whose power seems as inevitable as the sunrise. The choices you make will determine not just your own fate, but the fate of everyone you love, everyone who looks to you for protection and guidance. Your name is Boudica, and your story begins in the shadows of a changing world, in the quiet moments before the storm that will either preserve your people's freedom or destroy everything you hold dear. The weight of that destiny rests on your shoulders, and there is no escape from the path that lies ahead. The wheel of fate is turning, and you must choose whether to be crushed beneath it or to grasp it with both hands and try to turn it toward hope. The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat drifts across the great hall as the feast begins, but your attention is fixed on the stranger seated at your father's right hand. He wears Roman dress, a white toga with a purple stripe that marks his senatorial rank. Yet his hair is the color of autumn wheat, and his eyes hold the grey-green of British seas. This is Gaius Decianus Cartus, the new procurator of the province, come to discuss the tribute arrangements with your father, King Antedios of the Iceni. You are 17 years old, seated among the women, but listening with the sharp attention your mother taught you. A queen must have eyes in the back of her head and ears that catch whispers in the wind, she told you. Power flows not just through swords and shields, but through words carefully chosen and silences thoughtfully kept. Tonight, you practice these lessons as the most important conversation of your life unfolds across the firelit hall. The year is 43 CE, and Emperor Claudius has been on the throne for 3 years. His legions landed in Britain just months ago, crushing the Catuvelauni at the Medway and marching triumphant into their capital at Camulodunum. The conquest that Julius Caesar could only dream of has become reality, and the ripples of that transformation are spreading across every tribe in Britain. Your father has chosen the path of accommodation rather than resistance, recognizing that the Iceni's survival depends on adaptation rather than defiance. But accommodation with Rome comes at a price, and tonight you are learning exactly what that price entails. The tribute system benefits everyone, Decianus is saying, his Latin fluid but accented with the harsh consonants of Germania. He served his time on the Rhine frontier before coming to Britain, and you can see the soldier beneath the senator's robes. Your warriors gain Roman training and equipment. Your people gain access to Roman markets. Your lands gain Roman protection. Your father nods carefully, his weathered hands steady around his drinking horn. Antedios is a warrior king of the old school, scarred from battles with the Catuvelauni and the Trinovantes. But he has lived long enough to recognize when the tide of history has turned against the old ways. And in return, he asks, though everyone in the hall knows the answer, in return, you acknowledge Roman authority. You provide auxiliary troops when called upon. You maintain order in your territories according to Roman law, and you pay tribute in accordance with the assessment we will conduct of your resources. The words hang in the smoke-hazed air like a blade suspended over all your futures. You watch your father's face, reading the careful neutrality that he has perfected over years of tribal politics. But you can see deeper, to the pain beneath the pragmatism. This is not the world he was born to rule, not the legacy he hoped to leave his children. Your younger brother Karatakis shifts restlessly beside you. At 15, he burns with the desire for glory that marks young Celtic warriors, and every word of Roman accommodation strikes him like a personal insult. Your sister Lanosea, barely 12, watches with wide eyes that miss nothing. She has the makings of a diplomat, you think, or perhaps a spy. But it is you that the adults watch most carefully. You are the eldest child, the heir apparent to your father's throne, and everyone in the hall knows that your choices will shape the future of the Iceni. The question is whether that future will be one of gradual assimilation into the Roman world, or something else entirely. The conversation continues deep into the night, moving from broad policy to specific details. How many warriors will the Iceni provide? What portion of the grain harvest will go to Roman granaries? Which trade goods will be subject to imperial taxation? Each agreement feels like another thread in a net that will eventually enclose your people completely, but each refusal might bring the legions to your borders. As the feast winds toward its end, Decianus turns his attention to you directly. Lady Boudica, he says, using the Roman pronunciation of your name, I understand you will someday rule these people. What are your thoughts on the new arrangements? The hall falls silent. Every eye is upon you, and you feel the weight of generations pressing down on your shoulders. Your answer will be remembered, repeated, analyzed for hints of future policy. You are being tested, evaluated, catalogued in Roman minds as either an asset or a threat. You rise slowly, feeling the familiar comfort of your Celtic dress. The long woolen gown dyed with woad and madder, the talk of twisted gold at your throat that marks your royal blood, the amber beads that carry the power of ancient Baltic trade routes. These are not merely ornaments, but symbols of a culture that stretches back through centuries, connecting you to ancestors whose names have become legends. Honored Decianus, you begin, your voice carrying the musical cadence of the Celtic tongue even as you speak in careful Latin. My people have always honored their obligations to their allies. We understand that strength comes not from standing alone, but from choosing our friendships wisely. It is a diplomat's answer, neither acceptance nor refusal, but something more subtle. You are acknowledging Roman power without submitting to it, expressing cooperation without surrendering autonomy. Decianus nods appreciatively. He recognizes skillful negotiation when he hears it. But you are not finished. We also understand that the strongest friendships are those built on mutual respect and mutual benefit. The Iceni have much to offer Rome, but we also have much that must be preserved for our children and our children's children. Now the Romans lean forward slightly, sensing something beneath your words. You have just laid down a marker, established that there are limits to accommodation, lines that cannot be crossed without consequence. It is a message that will be reported back to the provincial governor and perhaps even to Claudius himself. Your father catches your eye and gives the slightest nod of approval. You have walked the tightrope successfully, maintaining dignity while avoiding provocation. But you can also see the worry in his gaze. He knows, as you do, that such diplomatic balancing acts cannot last forever. Sooner or later, Rome will demand more than words. The feast ends with ritual toasts to the emperor and to the gods of both peoples. As the guests disperse and the servants clear the tables, you walk out into the cool night air. The stars wheel overhead in patterns that the Druids use to read the future, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls. Perhaps an omen, perhaps merely a hunter going about its ancient business. Your mother finds you there, standing in the shadow of the great oak that has stood at the heart of your settlement for longer than anyone can remember. Queen Cartimandua is a small woman but fierce, daughter of a warrior dynasty that traces its lineage back to the legendary Brigantes. She has been your teacher in statecraft and your guide through the complex currents of tribal politics. "You spoke well tonight," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "But words are only the beginning. Soon you will need to choose which path the Iceni will walk." You nod, understanding the weight of her meaning. Your father grows older each year, and with him the generation that remembers Britain before Roman eagles darkened the sky. When your time comes to rule, you will face choices that he has been able to postpone through careful diplomacy and strategic delay. "What would you do, mother?" you ask. She is quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands touching the bark of the sacred oak. "I would remember that we are the children of warriors and the guardians of traditions older than Rome. But I would also remember that the dead cannot protect the living, and that sometimes survival requires compromise with things we despise. It is not an answer, but it is wisdom." As you stand there in the darkness, feeling the pulse of the ancient earth beneath your feet and the weight of destiny upon your shoulders, you begin to understand that your life will be defined not by simple choices between good and evil, but by impossible decisions between competing loyalties and irreconcilable truths. The wind stirs the leaves above you, and you imagine you can hear the voices of your ancestors whispering warnings and encouragement in equal measure. You are Boudica, daughter of kings, heir to a throne that may not survive the changes sweeping across the world. But you are also young and strong and fierce with the uncompromising fire of youth. Tomorrow you will wake to the same choices, the same pressures, the same impossible balance between preservation and adaptation. But tonight, standing beneath stars that have watched over your people since the beginning of time, you allow yourself to dream of a future where strength and wisdom might yet find a way to preserve what matters most. You do not yet know that your dreams will require blood to make them real, or that the price of preserving your people's freedom will be higher than you can imagine. You know only that you are the daughter of this land and the keeper of its ancient truths, and that whatever comes, you will meet it with the courage of your ancestors and the cunning of your own restless mind. The owl calls again, and you turn back toward the hall where embers still glow in the great hearth. There will be time enough for destiny tomorrow. Tonight you are simply a young woman learning the weight of power, the cost of leadership, and the terrible burden of loving something more than your own life. As you walk back through the darkness, you catch sight of movement in the shadows near the stables. Your brother Karaticus stands there with several young warriors, their heads bent together in intense conversation. Even from a distance, you can see the anger in their postures, the restless energy of young men who chafe against the constraints of accommodation. You pause, watching them, and a chill runs down your spine that has nothing to do with the night air. Change is coming to the Iceni, whether through careful diplomacy or violent resistance. The question is not whether it will happen, but how much of your world will survive the transformation. You are 17 years old, and you stand at the crossroads of history. The choices you make in the years to come will echo through time, shaping not just the fate of your people, but the very story that future generations tell about the last great Celtic rising against the power of Rome. But that is tomorrow's burden. Tonight you are simply a daughter walking home through the darkness, carrying the dreams and fears of a people who have placed their trust in your hands. The weight is almost unbearable, but you have been raised to bear it. You are Boudica, and your legend is about to begin. The marriage feast has lasted 3 days, and your throat is hoarse from accepting congratulations in 2 languages. Celtic well-wishers praise the alliance between noble houses, while Roman guests speak approvingly of the political stability your union will bring to the eastern territories. You smile and nod and play the part of the happy bride, but beneath the ceremonial joy lies a harder truth. This marriage is statecraft wrapped in ritual, diplomacy disguised as romance. Prasutagus stands beside you as the final toasts are offered, his hand warm and steady on your arm. He is 10 years your senior, already established as heir to the Iceni throne, and everything about him speaks of careful balance between old and new. His talk is gold in the ancient style, but his cloak-pin bears Roman workmanship. He speaks Latin as fluently as he does Celtic, conducts trade with merchants from Gaul, yet still consults the Druids before major decisions. He is exactly the kind of leader the Iceni need in these uncertain times, and exactly the kind of husband your political situation requires. The year is 47 CE, and your father's health has been failing since the harsh winter. Prasutagus has been chosen not just as your husband, but as his co-ruler and eventual successor, a man who can navigate the treacherous currents of Roman-British relations while maintaining the loyalty of the traditional warriors. It is a practical arrangement, but as the weeks pass, you find yourself genuinely drawn to his quiet strength and diplomatic skill. Your new life as queen-in-waiting involves a constant dance of competing demands. Roman officials expect your presence at formal ceremonies, your participation in the civic rituals that bind client kingdoms to imperial authority. Celtic tradition demands that you maintain the seasonal festivals, honor the ancient gods, and serve as spiritual mother to your people. Between these obligations, you learn to administer justice, collect taxes, arbitrate disputes, and manage the complex web of relationships that holds a tribal kingdom together. The hardest lessons come through watching Prasutagus work. He has mastered the art of appearing to yield while actually maintaining essential autonomy, of satisfying Roman demands without abandoning Celtic identity. When tax collectors arrive from the provincial capital, he provides precise accountings that meet their requirements while somehow omitting mention of certain hidden stores. When Roman merchants complain about trade restrictions, he adjusts policies with elaborate courtesy while preserving traditional markets for Iceni craftsmen. The key, he explains to you one evening as you review territorial disputes, is to understand what Rome truly needs versus what Rome thinks it wants. They need stability, productivity, and cooperation. They think they want complete control and cultural conformity. Give them the first without surrendering to the second, and you can preserve what matters most. It sounds simple when he says it, but the execution requires constant vigilance and perfect timing. Every interaction with Roman authority becomes a negotiation. Every decision, a calculation of benefits and risks. You watch him transform himself effortlessly from Celtic chieftain to Roman client to diplomatic equal, always maintaining his essential self while adapting to whatever role the moment requires. Your own transformation is more complex. The Celtic part comes naturally. You are born to the rhythms of seasonal celebration, raised on the stories that connect your people to the land they have worked for generations. When you stand before the great assembly at Beltane, calling down blessings on the crops and herds, you feel the power flowing through you like water through a familiar channel. The words of the ancient prayers feel right in your mouth, the ritual movements natural to your body. But the Roman part requires constant effort. Their language lacks the poetry of Celtic speech. Their ceremonies feel stiff and formal compared to the wild joy of traditional festivals. Worse, you can see how Roman influence slowly erodes the practices you hold sacred. Young people increasingly speak Latin in preference to their native tongue. Warriors seek positions in auxiliary units rather than following traditional chiefs. Merchants adopt Roman business practices that prioritize individual profit over tribal welfare. The changes are subtle but relentless, like water wearing away stone. Each small accommodation seems reasonable in isolation, but together they form a pattern of cultural dissolution that fills you with growing unease. You begin to understand that your father's generation faced a simple choice between resistance and accommodation. But your generation faces something far more insidious: the slow disappearance of everything that makes the Iceni who they are. This realization crystallizes during a visit from Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, the new provincial governor. He arrives with a modest escort, just 50 cavalry and 100 legionaries, but his presence fills your great hall like a storm front. This is the man who conquered Mauritania, who reduced fortified cities to rubble and enslaved entire populations. His appointment to Britain signals Rome's intention to complete the conquest that Claudius began. The formal dinner proceeds with careful courtesy, but you can feel the tension crackling beneath polite conversation. Suetonius speaks appreciatively of Iceni cooperation, praises Prasutagus for his administrative efficiency, compliments you on your command of Latin literature. But his grey eyes miss nothing, cataloguing defences, counting warriors, assessing the strength and loyalty of your military forces. I've been reviewing the tribute assessments, he says as the meal draws to a close. It seems there's room for improvement in several areas. Agricultural productivity could be enhanced through Roman farming techniques. Mineral resources appear underexploited. Military contributions could be increased given your population base. Each suggestion is phrased as friendly advice, but you recognize them as demands wrapped in diplomatic language. Rome's appetite for resources is growing, and client kingdoms are expected to feed that appetite, regardless of local needs or traditions. Prasutagus responds with his usual diplomatic skill, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, but promising careful consideration of all suggestions. But that night, in the privacy of your chamber, you see the strain the constant balancing act places on him. They want more every year, he says, staring into the fire that burns in your private hearth. More grain, more silver, more young men for their armies. Each demand seems reasonable until you add them together and realize they're asking for everything we have. You move to stand behind him, your hands on his shoulders, feeling the tension knotted in his muscles. What will you do? What I always do. Find ways to give them enough to keep them satisfied without giving them so much that we lose ourselves entirely. He turns in your arms, and you see exhaustion in his eyes alongside determination. But I worry that it's not sustainable forever. Sooner or later, they'll demand something I can't give without destroying what we're trying to preserve. Your first child arrives in the spring of 48 CE, a daughter you name Isolda, after your grandmother. She is born during a thunderstorm, and the midwives declare this an omen of great strength and fierce independence. As you hold her for the first time, feeling her tiny fingers grasp yours with surprising force, you are overwhelmed by the magnitude of responsibility. This child will inherit whatever world you and Prasutagus manage to preserve or create. The choices you make will determine whether she grows up free or enslaved, Celtic or Roman, proud of her heritage or ashamed of her barbarous ancestors. The next years bring both challenges and blessings. Your second daughter, Siora, is born in 50 CE during the harvest festival, and the Druids proclaim her a child of abundance and wisdom. Both girls thrive despite the political pressures surrounding their childhood, and you find unexpected joy in teaching them the old stories and watching them discover their own strength and intelligence. But the larger world continues to change around you. The Roman conquest advances steadily westward and northward, crushing resistance and establishing new settlements. Caratacus, the great Catuvelauni war leader, is finally captured and sent in chains to Rome. The Silures and Ordovices are hammered into submission through repeated campaigns. Each victory strengthens Roman confidence and increases pressure on remaining client kingdoms to prove their loyalty through greater contributions. The breaking point comes in 54 CE with the death of Emperor Claudius and the succession of his stepson Nero. The new regime brings new policies and new officials, many of whom view client kingdoms as an outdated compromise that should be replaced with direct imperial administration. Word filters back from Gaul that several client kingdoms there have been formally annexed, their royal families pensioned off or eliminated entirely. You stand with Prasutagus on the ramparts of your hill fort, watching smoke rise from a dozen villages where Roman surveyors are cataloguing resources for updated tax assessments. Everything familiar feels suddenly precarious, balanced on the edge of changes you cannot control or prevent. How long do we have, you ask? He considers this seriously, as he does all important questions. Years, perhaps. Maybe decades if we're clever and lucky. But not forever. Rome doesn't tolerate independent power indefinitely, even when it serves their interests. You think of your daughters, now 6 and 4 years old, racing through the halls with wooden swords and demanding stories of warrior queens. What kind of world will they inherit? What choices will they face when their time comes to lead? Then we use whatever time we have, you say finally. We preserve what we can, teach our children who they are, and prepare them for whatever comes next. Prasutagus nods, understanding all the implications packed into those simple words. Preparation might mean diplomatic maneuvering, cultural preservation, military planning, or something else entirely. But it will certainly mean difficult decisions and dangerous gambles, because the easy path of continued accommodation is slowly disappearing. As you stand there watching the sun set over lands that have been Celtic for 1,000 years, you feel the weight of destiny settling around you like a cloak. You are no longer simply learning to be a queen. You are becoming the kind of leader your people will need when the final crisis arrives. The skills you have developed in balancing competing demands will serve you well, but they may not be enough. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls, and you remember your mother's words about the dead being unable to protect the living. Soon you may face choices that will determine whether your people survive as a distinct culture or disappear entirely into the Roman world. The thought should terrify you, but instead you feel a strange calm settling over your mind. You are Boudica, queen of the Iceni, mother and warrior, diplomat and guardian of ancient ways. Whatever the future holds, you will meet it with all the strength and cunning at your command. The easy years are ending, but perhaps something greater is about to begin. The owl calls again, and you smile grimly in the darkness. Let it come then. Let Rome show its true face and make its final demands. You have spent 15 years learning the cost of accommodation, and you are ready to explore the price of resistance. Your daughters will inherit a world transformed, but they will inherit it as free women, or not at all. That much, at least, you can promise them. The letter bearing the imperial seal arrives on a grey morning in late autumn, carried by a courier whose mud-splattered cloak speaks of hard riding through October rain. You watch Prasutagus break the wax with fingers that tremble slightly, not from age, for he is barely 50, but from the wasting illness that has hollowed his cheeks and put shadows beneath his eyes. The disease came upon him suddenly this summer, and despite the best efforts of both Celtic healers and Roman physicians, it continues to drain his strength like water leaking from a cracked vessel. He reads in silence, his face revealing nothing, but you have learned to interpret the subtle signs of his distress, the tightening around his eyes, the way his left hand clenches slightly, the barely perceptible pause before he sets the document aside and reaches for his wine cup. Well, you ask, though part of you already knows what the letter contains. Catus wants to discuss administrative arrangements for the succession, he says carefully. The words are neutral, but you both understand their implications. Gaius Decianus Catus has been the provincial procurator for 3 years now, and his reputation for avarice precedes him wherever he goes. Client kingdoms that lose their rulers often find themselves facing sudden tax adjustments and territorial reorganizations that strip away their remaining autonomy. The year is 60 CE, and everything is changing. Suetonius Paulinus has launched his campaign against Anglesey, determined to crush the druidical stronghold that serves as the spiritual heart of British resistance. Roman forces are scattered across the island, suppressing uprisings and establishing new settlements. It is exactly the moment when predators like Catus might decide to settle old scores and seize new opportunities. You move to stand behind Prasutagus, your hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture that offers comfort, while allowing you to read the letter over his shoulder. The formal language cannot disguise the threat embedded in every carefully chosen word. Rome is preparing to collect what it considers its due, with or without Iceni cooperation. He wants to meet next month, Prasutagus continues, his voice steady despite the circumstances. to review the terms of tribute and discuss transitional arrangements that will ensure continued stability in the region. You feel something cold settle in your stomach. Transitional arrangements, as if your husband's death were already assumed, as if the independence of the Iceni was simply a temporary inconvenience to be swept away at the earliest opportunity. And your will, you ask? He gestures toward the wooden chest where important documents are kept. Completed last month. Half the kingdom to Rome, as is customary. Half to our daughters, with you as regent until they come of age. Joint sovereignty that acknowledges imperial claims while preserving Iceni rights. It is the same arrangement that other client rulers have used, a careful balance that satisfies Roman law while maintaining native autonomy. In theory, it should provide a smooth transition that protects your family and your people. In practice, you both know that Roman officials have been increasingly creative in their interpretation of such wills, finding excuses to seize complete control whenever it serves their purposes. The weeks that follow blur together in a haze of preparation and growing dread. Prasutagus continues to weaken despite your best efforts to nurse him back to health. The meeting with Catus approaches like a storm on the horizon, and you spend long hours with your advisors discussing strategy and contingencies. But beneath all the practical planning lies a deeper fear that this may be the end of everything your people have preserved through 2 decades of careful compromise. Your daughters sense the tension without understanding its source. Isolde, now 12, has inherited your fierce intelligence and your mother's diplomatic instincts. She watches the adults with thoughtful eyes, asking careful questions that reveal how much she comprehends about the political situation. Siora, 10, remains more interested in horses and hunting, but even she has grown quieter as the household prepares for crisis. The night before Catus arrives, Prasutagus calls you to his bedside. The fever has broken, leaving him clear-headed but obviously weakened. His hand finds yours in the darkness, and his grip still carries the strength that first attracted you to him 15 years ago. "Promise me something," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Anything. If they try to take everything, if they refuse to honor the will and attempt to seize complete control, don't let them destroy our daughter's inheritance without a fight. The Iceni have bent far enough. We cannot bend any further without breaking entirely." You squeeze his hand, understanding all the implications of his words. He is not just talking about property rights or political arrangements. He is talking about the survival of your people as a distinct culture, about whether your daughters will inherit anything worth having. "I promise," you whisper back, and feel something fundamental shift inside you. For 20 years you have been a diplomat's wife, a peacemaker, a bridge between worlds. But if Rome forces the choice between submission and resistance, you are prepared to discover what kind of warrior you might become. Catus arrives the next morning with an escort of 50 men, officially an honor guard. But you notice they are all veterans of the Germanic campaigns, hard-faced soldiers who wear their weapons with casual familiarity. The procurator himself has grown softer since his appointment to Britain, his toga showing the effects of good living, but his eyes remain sharp and calculating. The formal discussions begin in your great hall, with all the traditional courtesies observed. Wine is served, gifts are exchanged, compliments are offered on both sides. But you can feel the predatory patience beneath Catus's polished manners, the way a cat might watch a mouse before deciding whether to pounce. "My condolences on your husband's condition," he says to you, his Latin accent still carrying traces of his Germanic origins. Such a loss for the province. Prasutagus has been a model client ruler, balancing local needs with imperial requirements most admirably. "He still lives," you reply carefully, and continues to serve both his people and Rome with equal dedication. Catus nods, but his smile doesn't reach his eyes. Of course. But we must be practical about administrative continuity. The emperor expects smooth transitions, especially in regions as strategically important as this one. The conversation continues through the morning, dancing around the real issues while establishing positions and testing boundaries. Catus speaks of increased security needs that will require larger garrisons. He mentions infrastructure improvements that will necessitate higher taxation. He discusses the benefits of direct Roman administration for regions that might lack experienced local leadership. Each suggestion sounds reasonable in isolation, but together they form a clear picture of complete annexation disguised as helpful assistance. You respond with equal diplomatic skill, acknowledging Roman concerns while emphasizing Iceni capabilities and the advantages of existing arrangements. But beneath the polite sparring, you can sense his growing impatience with obstacles to his plans. The breaking point comes after the midday meal when Catus produces a scroll marked with official seals. "I've brought the updated tax assessment for your review," he says, his tone suggesting this is a mere formality. The new rates reflect changing economic conditions and increased administrative costs. You read quickly, translating the bureaucratic language into practical terms. The numbers make your blood run cold. The new assessment would claim nearly 70% of Iceni agricultural output, compared to the current 30%. It would require military contributions that would strip away most of your young warriors. It would impose administrative fees that would bankrupt the kingdom within 2 years. "This is impossible," you say, struggling to keep your voice level. "These demands would destroy our people." Catus shrugs, his expression suggesting that this is merely an unfortunate necessity. The costs of civilization are sometimes higher than we might prefer. But the benefits far outweigh the temporary hardships. Your people will gain access to Roman markets, Roman law, Roman protection. Surely that is worth some financial sacrifice. You look at Prasutagus, see him reading through the same document with growing alarm. Even in his weakened condition, he recognizes the trap being set for your people. This is not negotiation, it is extortion disguised as tax policy. "We need time to consider these proposals," Prasutagus says carefully. "Such significant changes require consultation with tribal elders and careful planning for implementation." "Time is unfortunately a luxury we cannot afford," Catus replies smoothly. "The governor expects these arrangements to be finalized before the spring campaigns begin. Imperial policy waits for no one, not even valued allies. The threat hangs in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. You understand now that this was never a negotiation. It was an ultimatum delivered with diplomatic courtesy. Rome has decided that the Iceni have outlived their usefulness as an independent client kingdom, and Catus has come to oversee their transformation into a directly administered territory. That evening, after the Romans have retired to their guest quarters, you sit with Prasutagus in your private chamber. He looks older than his years, worn down by illness and the weight of impossible choices. The fire in the hearth throws dancing shadows on the walls, and somewhere outside, an owl calls through the darkness. "They mean to take everything," he says, his voice hollow with exhaustion and defeat. "The will, the arrangements, the promises, none of it matters. They've already decided." You nod, feeling a strange calm settling over you. For 20 years you have tried to find middle ground between Celtic tradition and Roman law, hoping that careful diplomacy might preserve your people's essential identity. But now you see that middle ground was always an illusion. Rome tolerates difference only as long as it serves Roman purposes, and those purposes no longer include independent Celtic kingdoms. "Then we stop trying to accommodate them," you say quietly. Prasutagus turns to look at you, and for a moment his eyes hold something like their old fire. The other tribes are watching. The Trinovantes still remember when Camulodunum was their capital before the Romans turned it into a colonia. The Brigantes chafe under Cati Mandua's pro-Roman policies. Even some of the Catuvalauni remnants might rise if they saw hope of success. You have thought about this possibility many times over the years, but always as a distant contingency. Now it feels immediate and real. Could we win? Militarily. Perhaps if we strike before Suetonius returns from Anglesey. The garrison at Camulodunum is mostly veterans and auxiliaries, not legions. London is defended by merchants and clerks, not soldiers. We might take both cities before they could organize effective resistance. And after that? He is quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. After that, we would be fighting for survival. Rome doesn't forgive rebellion, and they don't negotiate with enemies who have drawn Roman blood. It would be victory or death, with no middle ground. The weight of that choice settles on your shoulders like a mantle of lead. You think of your daughters, sleeping peacefully in their chambers, unaware that their mother is contemplating decisions that might make them orphans or legends. You think of the thousands of Iceni families who trust you to protect them, to make choices that will preserve their children's future. But you also think of what submission means, not just higher taxes and foreign administrators, but the slow death of everything that makes your people who they are. Roman schools that teach your children to be ashamed of their heritage. Roman laws that reduce free warriors to tenant farmers. Roman gods that supplant the ancient spirits of grove and stream. We could send word to the other tribes quietly, you say, testing the idea aloud. Sound out their willingness to coordinate resistance. If enough join us, we might have a real chance. Prasutagus nods slowly. Your brother Caratacus has maintained contacts with warriors who escaped the conquest. Some of them have been waiting for an opportunity like this. The conversation continues deep into the night, moving from general strategy to specific planning. Which tribes might be trusted? How could messages be sent without alerting Roman spies? What would be the best targets for initial strikes? Each decision carries enormous risks, but doing nothing carries the certainty of cultural extinction. 3 days later, Catus delivers his final ultimatum. The tax assessments will be implemented immediately. Roman administrators will be installed to ensure efficient collection. Iceni military forces will be reduced and reorganized under direct Roman command. Any resistance will be considered rebellion against imperial authority. Prasutagus receives this news in his sickbed, too weak now to rise for formal audiences. But his voice remains steady as he delivers your response. The Iceni require additional time to consider these changes. We will provide our answer after the winter season. Catus's facade of diplomatic courtesy finally cracks. You seem to misunderstand the nature of these arrangements. They are not requests. They are imperial commands, backed by imperial authority. Then let Rome explain to the emperor why his loyal clients felt compelled to seek alternatives, you reply, stepping forward to stand beside your husband's bed. Your voice carries the ice of a British winter, and your eyes hold the fire of a forge. For the first time since his arrival, Catus looks uncertain. He had expected either submission or token resistance, not this calm defiance from a barbarian queen. But he recovers quickly, his expression hardening into the mask of a career bureaucrat who has crushed opposition in a dozen provinces. Very well, he says, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. But understand that continued resistance will have consequences. Imperial patience is not unlimited. After he leaves, taking his escort and his threats with him, you stand at the window watching the dust settle behind his departing column. Prasutagus calls your name softly, and you return to his bedside to find him smiling despite everything. No regrets? He asks. None, you reply, and realize that you mean it completely. The years of careful compromise have ended, and in their place comes something cleaner and more honest. You will fight for your people's freedom or die in the attempt, but you will not watch them disappear by degrees into Roman anonymity. The disease takes him 6 weeks later. During the darkest days of winter, when the wind howls across the marshes and ice forms in the cattle troughs. He dies as he lived, quietly, with dignity, surrounded by the people who loved him. His last words are for you. Remember your promise. Protect our daughter's inheritance. You bury him according to both Celtic and Roman custom, honoring his dual nature as bridge between worlds. The Druids perform the ancient rites that will guide his spirit to the other world, while Roman officials attend the formal ceremonies required for a client king. But beneath the ritual pageantry, you can feel change stirring like wind before a storm. Word of Prasutagus's death travels quickly, and within days Catus arrives with a larger escort, and a document bearing imperial seals. He reads the emperor's decision with bureaucratic precision. The will is declared invalid due to irregularities in succession law. The entire kingdom is forfeit to Rome. All royal property will be confiscated. All debts to Roman creditors will be collected immediately. You stand before him in your great hall, flanked by your daughters and the nobles who have served your family for generations. Around you, the symbols of centuries of Iceni independence, the torques and shields, the ancestral weapons, the sacred vessels, bear silent witness to the end of an era. By what right, you demand, your voice cutting through his legal recitation. Cuttus looks up from his scroll, his expression suggesting that the question itself is absurd. By the right of conquest, confirmed by imperial law and backed by imperial power, the Iceni exist at Rome's sufferance, and that sufferance has reached its natural conclusion. My husband served Rome faithfully for 20 years. His will was drawn according to Roman law. Our daughters are Roman citizens by birth. Your husband was a useful servant who outlived his usefulness. His will was the presumption of a barbarian who forgot his place. Your daughters are the offspring of rebels who must learn submission. The words hit you like physical blows, but you force yourself to remain standing, to maintain the dignity that is all you have left. Around you, your nobles shift restlessly, hands moving unconsciously toward weapons that Roman law forbids them to carry in formal assembly. But Cuttus is not finished. He nods to his centurion, who steps forward with iron manacles. Lady Boudica, you are commanded to submit to discipline for your husband's disobedience and your own intransigence. Your property is forfeit. Your children will be taken into Roman custody for proper education. You will be publicly chastised as an example to other natives who might be tempted to forget their place. The hall erupts in angry shouts from your followers, but Roman soldiers are already moving to block the exits. You see your daughters' faces, white with terror and confusion, and something inside you breaks and reforms into something harder and more terrible than anything you have ever felt. This is the moment. This is the choice that will define everything that follows. You can submit, accept the humiliation, watch your daughters disappear into Roman servitude, and hope that some fragment of your people's identity might survive the years of occupation that follow. Or you can remember your promise to a dying husband, your obligation to generations of ancestors, your duty to children who deserve to inherit something better than slavery disguised as civilization. The manacles click shut around your wrists, cold iron against skin that has never known bondage. Roman hands seize your daughters despite their struggles and cries. The centurion raises his scourge, preparing to deliver the humiliation that will mark your family's final submission to imperial will. But as the first blow falls across your shoulders, as the pain shoots through your body like liquid fire, as your daughter's screams echo off the ancient walls of your hall, you feel something ancient and terrible stirring in your blood. Not just anger. Anger burns out quickly, but something deeper and more enduring. You are Boudica, queen of the Iceni, daughter of a line that has ruled these lands since before Rome was more than a collection of mud huts beside the Tiber. Your ancestors fought Caesar himself to a standstill. Your people have never submitted to anyone, and they will not begin with you. The scourge falls again and again, each blow meant to break your spirit and teach you the futility of resistance. But with each strike, your resolve only hardens. With each cry from your daughters, your fury grows. With each sneer from Roman lips, your determination crystallizes into something that will reshape the world. They think they are punishing a barbarian queen into submission. They do not realize they are forging the weapon that will bring their empire to the edge of collapse. The beating ends. But your ordeal has only begun. As Roman soldiers drag you away to imprisonment, as your daughters disappear into custody, as your nobles are stripped of their weapons and property, you make a silent vow that will echo through the ages. Rome has chosen war. Very well. War they shall have, but not the kind they expect. Not the desperate flailing of a conquered people, but the focused fury of a mother whose children have been threatened, a queen whose people have been enslaved, a woman who has finally discovered the true price of accommodation. The manacles may hold your wrists, but they cannot chain your will. The scourge may mark your flesh, but it cannot touch your spirit. Rome may have won this battle, but the war is just beginning. You are Boudica, and your legend is about to be written in fire and blood across the length and breadth of Britain. The cell is dark and cold, carved from the living rock beneath the Roman administrative complex they built over your grandfather's ancient hall. Water seeps through the walls, carrying the metallic taste of iron and the deeper, older flavor of earth that remembers when your people's blood first blessed this ground. You have been here for 12 days, fed on bread and water, allowed no visitors save the guards who bring your meager rations and empty your waste bucket with elaborate disgust. But today is different. Today you hear footsteps in the corridor outside, and the scrape of the heavy key in the lock tells you that your time of waiting is finally over. The door swings open to reveal Marcus Decianus, Catus's chief administrator, flanked by 2 legionaries whose scarred faces speak of long service on dangerous frontiers. Behind them stands a figure that makes your breath catch in your throat. Your daughter Isolda, alive and unmarked, but wearing the simple tunic of a Roman servant instead of the fine clothing befitting a princess of the Iceni. Your daughter brings a message, Marcus says, his Latin crisp with military precision. The procurator wishes to discuss terms for your release and the future administration of this territory. You rise slowly from the straw pallet that serves as your bed. Every movement a careful negotiation with muscles that have stiffened during your confinement. The manacles have chafed raw wounds around your wrists, and the scourge marks on your back pull painfully as you straighten. But you are still Boudica, still queen, and you will not let Roman soldiers see weakness. Isolda's eyes meet yours across the narrow space, and in that moment you read a complex message written in the language only a mother and daughter share. Fear, yes, but also defiance, determination beneath submission. And something else, information, carefully preserved and waiting for the right moment to be shared. Mother, she says formally, her voice steady despite the circumstances, the procurator offers honorable terms for our family's surrender. We will be granted Roman citizenship and a pension suitable to our former rank. Siora and I will receive proper education in Roman schools. You will be allowed to live quietly on a small estate under appropriate supervision. The words are carefully chosen, probably dictated by Catus himself, but you hear the message beneath them. Your daughters are safe for now, but their future depends entirely on your cooperation. Submit completely, and they might survive as pampered prisoners. Resist further, and they will disappear into the vast machinery of imperial slavery. And my people? You ask, though you already know the answer. Marcus shrugs, the gesture dismissing the lives of thousands with casual indifference. They will be administered directly by Roman officials. Taxes will be collected efficiently. Order will be maintained. Those who cooperate will prosper. Those who resist will be dealt with according to law. You study his face, reading the bureaucrat's certainty that efficiency and order represent the highest possible good. He genuinely believes he is offering you a generous settlement, that life under Roman rule represents progress and civilization. The idea that your people might value freedom more than prosperity, independence more than security, simply does not exist in his mental framework. I need time to consider, you say finally. Time is a luxury that rebels cannot afford, Marcus replies, but his tone suggests he had expected this request. You have until dawn. After that, the offer expires and other arrangements will be made. They withdraw, taking Isolda with them, and you are left alone with your thoughts and the weight of an impossible choice. Through the small window high in your cell wall, you can see a slice of grey sky that speaks of winter's approach. Somewhere above you, your people go about their daily lives under Roman occupation, adapting, as they must, to new laws and foreign administrators. But that night, as darkness settles over the land like a familiar cloak, you hear something that changes everything. Voices in the corridor, speaking in the old tongue with the careful cadence of formal poetry. A song that your grandmother taught you, that her grandmother taught her, carrying words that reach back through the mists of time to the first Celtic warriors who claimed this island as their own. The guards do not understand what they are hearing. To Roman ears, it is merely barbarian noise, the meaningless chanting of primitive people clinging to outdated customs. But you know better. This is the song of summoning, the ancient call that brings warriors together when the tribe faces mortal danger. Someone has remembered the old ways, and the fire of resistance is stirring in hearts you thought had been extinguished by years of accommodation. You move to the window, pressing your face against the iron bars to catch every word. The song comes from multiple directions now, carried by voices throughout the settlement. Young men and old warriors and farmers, even women whose husbands serve in Roman auxiliary units, all joining in the ancient rhythm that binds your people together across the generations. As the song reaches its crescendo, you hear something else. The sound of horses moving quietly through the darkness, the whisper of weapons being prepared in secret, the subtle rustling that speaks of people gathering for purposes that Roman administrators would not approve. Your brother Caraticus has not been idle during your imprisonment. The network of resistance that you and Prasutagus only dreamed of is becoming reality. The next morning, Marcus returns with a larger escort and an air of barely contained impatience. He clearly expects your submission, having calculated that a barbarian queen would value her daughters' lives above abstract principles of independence. His mistake is assuming that you are merely a barbarian queen, rather than the living embodiment of everything your people hold sacred. Your answer, he demands, not bothering with diplomatic courtesies this time. You look past him to the corridor where your daughters wait under heavy guard. Isolde catches your eye again, and this time her message is clearer. They are ready. Whatever you decide, they are prepared to accept the consequences. The daughters of Boudica will not be used as weapons against their own people. I have an answer, you say, your voice carrying the formal cadence of royal pronouncement. But not for you. My words are for Roman ears that matter. Marcus flushes with anger at the implied insult, but before he can respond, a commotion erupts in the corridor outside. Shouts in Latin, the clash of weapons, the thunder of running feet. A legionary appears in the doorway, his face pale with excitement and fear. Sir, we're under attack. Armed natives have seized the main gate. The sound that comes from your throat is barely human, a war cry that carries the accumulated fury of 20 years of submission, 12 days of imprisonment, and the intolerable sight of your daughters in Roman chains. It echoes off the stone walls with primal force, and you see even the veteran soldiers step back involuntarily. Marcus draws his gladius, but you are already moving. The manacles may bind your hands, but your legs are free, and 20 years of Celtic warrior training have not been forgotten. You drive your shoulder into his chest, sending him stumbling backward into his men. In the confusion that follows, Isolde breaks free from her guards and throws herself at the nearest Roman, her teeth finding his wrist with the precision of a hunting wolf. The cell erupts in chaos, Romans shouting orders, your daughters fighting with desperate courage, the clash of weapons as more warriors pour into the corridor. Through it all, you hear the ancient war songs growing louder, carried by hundreds of voices that speak your name like a prayer or a curse. Boudica, Boudica, Boudica. Hands seize the manacles, and you feel the cold iron fall away as someone with lockpicking skills learned in darker times frees your wrists. A familiar voice speaks your name, and you turn to see your brother Caraticus, older and scarred, but still carrying the fire that marked him from childhood. Sister, he says, pressing a sword into your freed hands. Your people are waiting. You follow him through corridors that run red with Roman blood, past the bodies of guards who thought they were overseeing the slow death of Celtic independence. The sword feels strange in your grip after years of diplomacy, but the weight of it awakens something in your muscles that remembers how to kill. Outside, the settlement burns with the light of liberation. Roman buildings blaze like funeral pyres, while Celtic warriors reclaim weapons that had been confiscated or hidden. The administrative complex that symbolized foreign rule has become a torch that signals the beginning of something larger and more terrible than its builders ever imagined. But this is only the beginning. As you emerge into the smoky dawn, you see them. Thousands of Iceni warriors gathered in the great space before what was once your hall. Men and women, young and old, all bearing the blue spiral tattoos that mark them as followers of the ancient ways. Behind them, the banners of other tribes, Trinovantes, remnants of the Catuvelauni, even some Brigantes who have rejected their queen's accommodation with Rome. They see you emerge from captivity, see the blood on your hands and the fire in your eyes, and their voices rise in a roar that shakes the earth itself. This is not mere rebellion. This is resurrection, the rebirth of something that Rome thought it had killed forever. You stand before them, your torn clothes and bloodied hands, proclaiming more eloquently than any speech that the time for accommodation has ended. The scourge marks on your back are visible through the rents in your tunic, and every warrior present understands what they represent. This is not just their queen speaking, this is their shame and their rage given voice. Children of the ancient blood, you call out, your voice carrying across the assembled multitude. For 20 years we have bent our necks to Rome's yoke. For 20 years we have given them our grain, our silver, our sons. For 20 years we have watched them desecrate our sacred places and mock our ancestors. No more. The crowd responds with a sound like thunder, like the roar of the sea against cliffs, like the voice of the earth itself crying out against injustice. You feel their energy flowing into you, feeding the fire that burns in your chest, transforming you from a prisoner into something primal and terrible. They thought to break us with chains and scourges. They thought to silence us with threats against our children. They thought that years of submission had made us tame, that we had forgotten how to fight. You raised the sword above your head, letting the blade catch the light of the burning buildings. Let them learn how wrong they were. Picture it now. You stand on the raised platform where Roman magistrates dispensed foreign law to your people, your feet planted on stones that have drunk the blood of your enemies. Around you, the symbols of conquest burn like offerings to ancient gods who have been patient far too long. Your daughters stand at your right hand, their faces streaked with soot and their eyes bright with fierce pride. Your brother holds the banner of your house, the red boar of the Iceni that has not flown free for 20 years. This is not the life you were born to live. This is not the queen you thought you would become. But as the war cries echo across the marshlands, and messengers gallop toward distant settlements with news of the rising, you understand that this is the moment your entire existence has been building toward. Every compromise, every humiliation, every careful diplomatic dance has led to this declaration of absolute defiance. You think of Prasutagus and the promise you made to him in his final hours. You think of the generations of ancestors whose blood runs in your veins, warriors who never bent the knee to any foreign power. You think of the future your daughters will inherit if you fail, and the legend they might carry if you succeed. The speech continues, but you are already beyond words. You are Boudica, queen of the Iceni, and you have finally remembered what it means to be free. The sword in your hand weighs nothing at all, because it carries the weight of destiny itself. Behind you, the last Roman building collapses in a shower of sparks that rises toward the grey sky like prayers made visible. Before you, an army takes shape from the morning mist, united not by gold or fear, but by something deeper and more enduring. The unbreakable bond between a people and their land, between the living and the dead, between what was and what might yet be. War is coming to Britain, but this time it will be a war of Rome's making and Celtic choosing. You have crossed the line from which there can be no return, and you have brought your people with you. Let the eagles tremble, Let the legions march. Let Rome itself take notice. Boudica has awakened, and she is magnificent in her terrible wrath. The war chariot beneath you thunders across the dawn landscape, its iron-shod wheels striking sparks from the ancient stones of the Roman road. Behind you, spread across the horizon like storm clouds, comes the largest army Britain has seen since Caesar's time. 60,000 warriors drawn from a dozen tribes, united by rage and the intoxicating possibility of driving the invaders back into the sea from which they came. The wind whips your red hair free from its bindings, sending it streaming like a banner behind you as the chariot bounces and sways with the rhythm of your horse's gallop. Your daughters ride in their own chariot just behind you, their young faces set with the same grim determination that has transformed you from diplomat to destroyer. This is their inheritance now, not gold or peaceful succession, but the bloody gift of seeing their mother reclaim what was stolen. 2 days have passed since the taking of your settlement. 2 days of gathering warriors and planning the assault that will announce to Rome that their conquest was incomplete. Word has spread across the eastern territories with the speed of wildfire. Boudica has risen, the sacred groves whisper her name. The old gods have awakened from their long sleep to guide her spear. Your first target lies ahead, its red-tiled roofs and white marble columns rising like an obscene growth from the gentle hills of Essex. Camulodunum, Colchester to the Romans, the first capital of their British province, built deliberately over the ruins of the ancient Catuvellauni stronghold. Here they established their colonia, their colony of retired veterans granted land stolen from native tribes. Here they built their temple to the deified Claudius, forcing your people to worship the emperor as a god while forbidding them to honor their own ancestors. The sight of it fills you with something beyond anger, a cold, purifying hatred that burns like ice in your veins. This is not merely a military target, but a symbol of everything Rome represents. The arrogance of conquest, the erasure of memory, the transformation of free peoples into tax-paying subjects. If you can take Camulodunum, if you can pull down their temple and slaughter their veterans, you will prove that Roman power in Britain rests on foundations far more fragile than they believe. The advance scouts return as your army crests the final hill before the city. The news they bring confirms your hopes. Suetonius Paulinus and his legions remain trapped on Anglesey, fighting the Druids in their sacred strongholds. The garrison at Camulodunum consists of perhaps 200 auxiliaries and a handful of administrative troops, men who enlisted for steady pay and peaceful retirement, not the brutal work of combat. More importantly, the colonia's walls are ornamental rather than defensive, built to impress visitors rather than withstand siege. Roman confidence has grown so complete that they never imagined needing serious fortifications in what they considered a pacified province. That confidence will be their doom. You raise your hand, and 60,000 warriors halt as one, their weapons glinting in the morning sun like scales on some vast dragon. The silence is profound and terrible. No shouting, no war cries, just the breathing of men and women who have finally found a worthy outlet for years of accumulated rage. There, you say, your voice carrying clearly across the front ranks. There lies our revenge. Not just against Romans, but against everyone who told us resistance was futile, accommodation was wisdom. Survival was worth any price. You can see it now, smoke beginning to rise from the outlying buildings as your advance parties carry out their assigned tasks. The attack has begun with the systematic precision that marks your brother's military planning. But the fire that drives it comes from something deeper than strategy. The Temple of Claudius dominates the city center, its massive columns and marble steps declaring Roman power to anyone who might dare question it. British taxes built this monument to foreign conquest. British labor shaped its stones. British gold adorned its altars. Today, British hands will pull it down stone by stone until nothing remains but rubble and ashes. Your chariot plunges down the hillside toward the city gates, And behind you, the great army flows like a river in flood. The sound of their approach grows from a whisper to a roar. Hoofbeats and war cries, the clash of weapons, and the screams of horses driven to their limits. This is how your ancestors rode to battle against Caesar himself, and this is how their spirits ride with you now. The first Roman you see is a veteran centurion, grey-haired and scarred, standing in the gateway with his gladius drawn and his shield raised in desperate defiance. He dies under your spear before he can speak a word, his blood spattering across the white stones like an offering to gods who have been too long neglected. Then you are through the gates and into the streets of Camulodunum itself, your chariot wheels crushing the carefully laid Roman stones as you race toward the heart of the city. All around you, the Colonia erupts in chaos as your warriors pour through the breached defenses like water through a broken dam. But this is not the mindless destruction that Roman historians will later describe. This is surgical vengeance, each target chosen for its symbolic value as much as its strategic importance. The forum where Roman law replaced tribal justice. The amphitheatre where British gladiators died for Roman entertainment. The basilica where British merchants were forced to conduct business according to foreign customs. Each building that burns represents a piece of stolen heritage. Each Roman who dies pays for a Celtic life destroyed by conquest and occupation. You guide your chariot through the smoke and flame, directing the assault with the eye of a general and the heart of an avenging goddess. The temple of Claudius stands before you now, its great bronze doors barred against your approach. Here the survivors have gathered, veterans and their families, Roman citizens and their British servants. Anyone who hopes the sacred nature of the place might offer some protection from Celtic fury. You dismount from your chariot, your feet touching the marble steps that were built with taxes wrung from your people's labor. The bronze doors are beautiful in their way, decorated with scenes of Roman triumph and British submission. Your spear point finds the gap between them, and with a sound like breaking bones, they swing open to reveal the terror within. They huddle around the altar like sheep in a storm, perhaps 300 souls who thought their superior civilization would protect them from barbarian vengeance. The statue of Claudius looms over them, gilded and serene, promising them the protection of divine authority. But you serve older gods now, powers that predate Rome by millennia, spirits of grove and stream and battlefield who remember when this land was free. The bronze spear in your hand was forged in the old way, blessed by druids who called down the wrath of the Morrigan herself. When you speak, it is with a voice that carries the authority of earth and sky. You built this place with stolen wealth, you say, your words echoing off the marble walls. You forced my people to worship your dead emperor while forbidding them to honor their own ancestors. You made them pay for their own subjugation. A Roman matron steps forward, her hands clasped in supplication. She is perhaps 60 years old, grey-haired and dignified, the wife of some veteran who served his 25 years and earned his colonial farm through loyal service. Her Latin is cultured, her bearing refined, everything Roman civilization claims to represent. Please, she says, her voice steady despite her fear, we are not your enemies. We came here seeking only peace and prosperity for our families. We have harmed no one. You study her face, reading the genuine bewilderment there. She truly does not understand why her presence in this place might be seen as an act of war. The concept that prosperity built on others' dispossession might be a form of violence simply does not exist in her mental framework. Your peace was built on our subjugation, you reply. Your prosperity was purchased with our freedom. Your presence here is an act of conquest disguised as settlement. The spear moves before conscious thought can intervene, and the matron falls with barely a sound. Around her, the other Romans begin to scream and flee, but there is nowhere to run. Your warriors have sealed every exit, and the temple that was meant to symbolize eternal Roman power has become a trap for its creators. What follows is methodical rather than frenzied, each death a deliberate choice rather than a moment of blind rage. These are not innocents. They are colonizers who profited from conquest and occupation. Their children will not grow up to inherit lands stolen from Celtic families. Their grandchildren will not learn to despise the culture their ancestors destroyed. You stand in the center of the slaughter, watching your warriors work with the precision of men and women who understand exactly what they are doing and why. This is not madness or mindless violence. This is justice delayed but not denied. Payment collected on a debt that has grown with compound interest over 20 years of humiliation. The statue of Claudius falls with a crash that seems to shake the earth itself, its gilded features cracking against the marble floor. Your warriors swarm over it with hammers and axes, reducing the symbol of imperial divinity to fragments small enough to be scattered to the winds. By afternoon, nothing remains of the temple of Claudius but rubble and ashes. The Colonia burns from end to end, its carefully planned streets now rivers of flame that carry the detritus of Roman civilization toward the surrounding marshes. The survivors, those few who managed to flee before your warriors sealed the perimeter, will carry word of the destruction to every corner of the province. But you are not finished. As the sun sets behind walls of smoke, you stand before your assembled army and speak of larger purposes. Camulodunum was only the beginning, the first note in a symphony of destruction that will echo across Britain until every Roman eagle has been pulled down and every legion driven back across the sea. Tomorrow we march on Londinium, you tell them, your voice carrying across the multitude like the voice of prophecy itself. Let them see what happens when free peoples remember their strength. Let them learn the price of thinking they could make slaves of the children of heroes. The war cry that answers you seems to shake the stars themselves. 60,000 voices united in a sound that speaks of ancient power, awakened and modern revenge finally unleashed. You have crossed a line tonight that can never be uncrossed, committed acts that Rome will neither forgive nor forget. But as you stand among the ruins of their temple, feeling the heat of their burning city warm your face and the weight of your ancestors' approval settle around your shoulders like a cloak, you understand that this is exactly what was meant to happen. This is the moment your entire life has been building toward, the purpose for which you were born and trained and tested. You are Boudica, destroyer of cities, and your legend has only just begun to take shape in blood and flame. The merchant vessel burns like a signal fire in the grey waters of the Thames, its cargo of wine and olive oil feeding flames that reach toward the low-hanging clouds. From the deck of your war barge, you watch Roman civilians flee along the muddy banks of Londinium, their arms laden with whatever portable wealth they can carry. The great commercial heart of Roman Britain convulses in the grip of panic as word spreads that Boudica and her army have come to collect another debt. 9 days have passed since Camulodunum fell, 9 days of pursuit and slaughter as your forces swept across the countryside like a cleansing fire. Every Roman villa has been reduced to ashes, every collaborator's estate stripped bare, every symbol of foreign rule erased from the landscape. The roads that once carried Roman authority to the farthest corners of Britain now stream with refugees fleeing toward distant garrisons and the promise of legionary protection. But Londinium offers no such safety. The city that the Romans built as their commercial capital has grown fat and complacent on the wealth of British trade, its merchants more concerned with profit margins than military preparedness. The timber wharves that line the river groan under warehouses stuffed with goods from across the empire. But those same warehouses will burn as readily as any other structure built by foreign hands. Your daughter Isolde stands beside you at the bow of the barge, her young face set in lines that speak of terrible maturity gained too quickly. She has seen things in the past days that no child should witness, the systematic destruction of everything her mother's generation tried to preserve through compromise. But she has also seen the intoxicating power of absolute resistance, the way entire peoples can transform overnight, from subjects into warriors when the right spark ignites their accumulated rage. How many do you think will stand and fight? She asks, her voice carrying the tactical curiosity that marks her as your true daughter. You study the sprawling settlement ahead, reading the signs of impending collapse in every detail. Smoke rises from a dozen points where advance parties have already begun their work. The great bridge that spans the Thames stands empty except for fleeing civilians, no legionary formations, no disciplined ranks of auxiliaries preparing defensive positions. None, you reply with certainty that surprises even you. They are merchants and clerks, moneylenders and tax collectors. They know the price of everything and the value of nothing. When faced with death, they will choose flight over honor every time. The barge scrapes against the muddy bank with a sound like breaking bones, and you leap ashore without waiting for the gangplank. Your feet touch British soil that has been defiled by Roman commerce for 20 years, ground that has absorbed the sweat of enslaved laborers and the tears of dispossessed farmers. Today it will drink Roman blood until the debt is balanced. Your army flows off the barges and into the streets of Londinium like a tide of retribution 20 years in the making. Behind you come the Iceni, your own people whose patience has finally reached its limit. Beside them march the Trinovantes, still burning with fury over the loss of their ancient capital. From the north come Brigantes warriors who have rejected their queen's accommodation policies, and from the west ride Catuvelauni survivors who remember when this land was free. The systematic destruction begins immediately, but it follows patterns that Roman minds cannot comprehend. This is not random vandalism, but ritual cleansing, each target chosen for its symbolic significance in the architecture of occupation. The forum where British merchants were forced to adopt Roman business practices. The tax offices where wealth was extracted from native producers and shipped to distant beneficiaries. The slave markets where free Britons were sold like cattle to feed the empire's appetite for human chattel. You move through the burning streets like an avatar of divine justice, your bronze spear drinking Roman blood while your voice carries orders that direct the flow of destruction. But even as you orchestrate the city's obliteration, part of your mind remains coldly calculating, aware that larger forces are moving beyond the immediate theatre of revenge. Word reached you yesterday that Suetonius Paulinus has abandoned his campaign against the Druids and is racing south with every man he can muster. The 9th Legion, under Petilius Cerialis, attempted to relieve Camulodunum, but was scattered by your advance forces, losing their eagle and half their effective strength in the process. But Suetonius still commands 2 full legions plus auxiliaries, perhaps 10,000 disciplined troops who have spent their careers crushing rebellions from Germany to Armenia. The race is on now, a deadly game of time and positioning that will determine whether your uprising burns out in isolated victories or grows into something that can drive Rome from Britain forever. You have perhaps a week before Suetonius can organize effective resistance, a week to complete the destruction of Roman administrative infrastructure and unite every remaining free tribe under your banner. A scream cuts through your tactical musings, and you turn to see a Roman matron clutching her children while one of your warriors advances with blood-stained blade. For a moment, the tableau freezes, mother and children cowering before Celtic justice, their civilized world collapsing around them in smoke and flame. You feel the weight of decision settle on your shoulders. These are not soldiers or administrators, but civilians whose only crime was accepting the benefits of conquest while remaining willfully blind to its costs. Their children are innocents who never chose to be born into a system built on others' subjugation. But then you remember your own daughters, violated and threatened by Roman officials who saw them as nothing more than useful hostages. You remember Prasutagus dying slowly while Roman tax collectors calculated how much they could extract from his funeral arrangements. You remember 20 years of watching your people diminish, one compromise at a time, until they barely remembered what freedom felt like. The spear point finds its mark with surgical precision, and the Roman family joins the thousands of others who will never again profit from British dispossession. There can be no half measures in this war, no mercy for those who built their prosperity on others' suffering. Every Roman who dies today is one fewer colonizer to poison the next generation with imperial values. By evening, Londinium burns from the Thames to the northern hills, its destruction visible for miles across the flat river country. The commercial heart of Roman Britain has been surgically removed, its warehouses scattered to ash, its inhabitants fled or dead. But more importantly, you have sent a message that will echo across the empire. The conquest of Britain is not yet complete, and the price of maintaining it may be higher than Rome is willing to pay. Your war council convenes in the ruins of the Roman governor's palace, where Suetonius once held court and dispensed imperial justice to conquered peoples. Now the gilded walls run with soot and blood, while Celtic chieftains debate strategy by the light of burning tax records. Your brother Caratacus spreads a map on the marble table, where Roman officials once planned the exploitation of British resources. His finger traces roads and settlements, marking the positions where intelligence reports place enemy forces. Suetonius has consolidated at Verulamium, he reports, his voice carrying the tension of a hunter who senses dangerous prey ahead. 2 full legions plus auxiliaries, the 14th and 20th. He's been calling in every available man from garrison duty across the province. You study the map, reading the tactical situation with skills learned through years of observing Prasutagus, navigate political crises. Verulamium sits astride Watling Street, the great road that connects the Thames Valley with the Western Territories. From there, Suetonius can move to intercept your forces no matter which direction you choose to advance. He's giving up territory to concentrate his strength, you observe. That means he understands he can't defeat us through dispersed resistance. Caratacus nods grimly. It also means he's confident in his ability to win a direct confrontation. Roman discipline against Celtic fury. He's fought that battle before, in Gaul and Germany. He knows how it usually ends. The other chieftains stir restlessly around the table, their scarred faces reflecting the firelight that flickers through the ruined windows. These are men who have spent lifetimes raiding and skirmishing, but the prospect of facing legions in open battle tests even their considerable courage. Maponos of the Trinovantes leans forward, his voice heavy with the weight of tactical reality. We have numbers. Perhaps 70,000 warriors now, with more arriving daily. But they have training, equipment, discipline, and they'll choose the ground to favor their strengths. Then we don't give them that choice, you reply, feeling certainty crystallize in your mind like ice forming on still water. We make them come to us, on ground of our choosing, fighting for objectives they can't abandon. You trace your finger across the map, following the network of roads that connect every major settlement in Roman Britain. Verulamium itself, another Roman town, another symbol of conquest. If we can take it before Suetonius arrives, he'll have to attack us to reclaim it. He can't retreat and leave a major settlement in rebel hands. Not if he wants to maintain imperial authority. The silence that follows speaks of men wrestling with the implications of your proposal. This would not be another massacre of helpless civilians, but a direct confrontation with the finest military machine the world has ever known. The stakes could not be higher. Victory would drive Rome from Britain forever, but defeat would doom your people to generations of savage reprisal. Caratacus speaks first, his voice carrying the fatalism of a warrior who has already made peace with death. The Druids would call it geasa, a sacred obligation that admits no compromise. We've crossed the line beyond which retreat becomes dishonor. One by one, the other chieftains voice their agreement. Not enthusiasm, they understand the odds too clearly for that, but grim acceptance of necessity. You have united them not through promises of easy victory, but through the shared recognition that some things matter more than survival. As the council disperses to prepare for tomorrow's march, you remain alone in the ruined palace with your daughters. Siora has fallen asleep on a pile of scorched tapestries, exhausted by days of constant movement and violence. But Isolde sits wakefully beside the dying fire, her intelligent eyes reflecting thoughts too mature for her 14 years. "We're really going to fight them, aren't we?" she asks quietly. "The legions, I mean." not just helpless townspeople. You nod, seeing no point in protecting her from truths she will learn soon enough. Yes, and we may very well die in the attempt. She considers this with the careful attention she has always brought to difficult problems. But if we don't fight them now, we'll never get another chance. They'll be ready for us next time. The wisdom in her words strikes you like a physical blow. At 14, your daughter understands strategic reality more clearly than generals twice her age. She has inherited not just your intelligence, but your willingness to face hard truths without flinching. That's right, you confirm. This moment, right now, while they're scattered and we're united, this may be the only chance our people ever get to throw off Roman rule. Isolde nods solemnly, accepting her inheritance of impossible choices and deadly gambles. Then she reaches out to take your hand, her young fingers surprisingly strong and steady. Then we'd better not waste it, she says simply. Outside, the last buildings of Londinium collapse in showers of sparks that rise toward the star-filled sky like prayers made visible. Your army prepares for the march that will carry them to glory or death, and in the distance, Roman signals fires bloom on hilltops as Suetonius calls in every available sword. You are Boudica, destroyer of cities, and tomorrow you will discover whether the same fury that swept away Camulodunum and Londinium can stand against the disciplined might of imperial legions. The wheel of fate is spinning toward its final revolution, and soon you will know whether you have written your people's liberation or their epitaph in fire and blood. But tonight, sitting in the ruins of Roman power, with your daughter's hand warm in yours, you feel something like peace settling over your war-torn spirit. You have done everything possible to honor your promises to the living and the dead. Whatever comes tomorrow, you will meet it as the worthy daughter of warriors and the faithful guardian of ancient ways. The stars wheel overhead in patterns that druids use to read the future, and somewhere in their cold light, you imagine you can see the faces of all who have died to bring you to this moment. They are watching, waiting to see whether their sacrifice will purchase freedom or merely postpone the inevitable. You are ready to give them their answer. The mist rises from the valley floor like the breath of ancient gods awakening to witness what may be the final act of Celtic independence in Britain. Through the grey veil, you can see them, the legendary formations that have conquered half the world, rank upon rank of scarlet shields and polished bronze, eagles glinting in the pale morning light. Suetonius Paulinus has chosen his ground well, positioning his legions on rising ground with forests protecting their flanks and a clear field of fire before their front. Behind you stretches the largest army Britain has ever seen. Perhaps 100,000 warriors drawn from every tribe that still remembers what freedom tastes like. They fill the valley from edge to edge, a living sea of painted shields and ancestral weapons, of horses and chariots, and men whose fathers fought Caesar himself to a standstill. But as you study the disciplined enemy ranks ahead, you understand with crystalline clarity that numbers alone will not be enough to break the most professional military force the world has ever known. The year is 61 CE, and this morning will determine whether Britain belongs to Rome or to its ancient peoples. Everything you have fought for, everything you have sacrificed, everything your ancestors died to preserve comes down to this single day on this unremarkable patch of ground somewhere along Watling Street. Win, and you drive the eagles back across the sea forever. Lose, and your people face extermination or slavery so complete that future generations will barely remember what they once were. Your war chariot stands at the front of the Celtic host, its bronze fittings gleaming with oil and polish. Your daughters ride in their own chariot just behind you, Isolde holding the reins with steady hands, while Ciora grips a spear too large for her 12-year-old frame. They insisted on their place in the battle line, and you lack both the time and the heart to argue with them. If this is to be the end, then you will end it together, as befits the daughters of queens and the heirs to a tradition that stretches back to the mists of time. The Roman formations are imposing in their mathematical precision. The 14th Gemina holds the center, veterans of the Germanic campaigns whose scarred faces speak of battles fought from the Rhine to the Danube. On their right stand the 20th Valeria Victrix, the legion that broke the Silures and pacified Wales through systematic brutality. Between them march auxiliary cohorts, Germanic spearmen, Gallic cavalry, British traitors who have sold their birthright for Roman gold. But it is the man who commands them that worries you most. Gaius Suetonius Paulinus stands beneath the eagle of the 14th, his scarred face calm with the confidence of a general who has never lost a battle. This is the man who conquered Mauritania, who reduced fortified cities to rubble and enslaved entire populations. He has spent his career crushing rebellions, and he understands exactly how to break the wild courage of barbarian warriors through patient discipline and calculated slaughter. The preliminaries drag through the morning with ritual precision. Druids emerge from your ranks to call down curses upon Roman heads, their white robes stark against the painted bodies of the warriors who follow them. Roman priests respond with their own ceremonies, offering sacrifices to Mars and calling upon Jupiter to grant victory to imperial arms. Both sides understand that this battle will be decided by more than tactics and courage. The gods themselves have stakes in what happens here. Your own preparations are more intimate and more terrible. You stand apart from the army with the sacred spear that has been blessed by the last free druids in Britain. Its bronze point gleaming with oils that carry the power of grove and stream. This weapon was forged in the old way, with rituals that predate Roman civilization by centuries. When you wield it today, you will channel not just your own strength, but the accumulated power of every warrior who has died defending this island from foreign conquest. A horn sounds from the Roman lines, and you see movement as Suetonius himself rides forward under a herald's banner. The gesture is formal courtesy, but you recognize the psychological warfare beneath it. He wants to speak with you before the battle, to demonstrate Roman confidence while probing for weaknesses in your own resolve. You mount your chariot and drive out to meet him in the space between the armies, your daughters flanking you while your brother Caraticus rides guard. The Roman general approaches with a small escort, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts as he studies the barbarian queen who has dared to challenge imperial authority. "Lady Boudica," he says in accented but fluent Celtic, the words carrying just enough respect to avoid outright insult. "I bring terms from the emperor. Surrender now, and your people will be treated with clemency. Your daughters will be educated as Roman citizens. You yourself will be granted exile rather than execution." You study his weathered face, reading the soldier's pragmatism beneath the diplomatic language. Suetonius would prefer to end this without the massive casualties that victory will cost him, but he is prepared to pay that price if necessary. This is a man who calculates everything in terms of cost and benefit, who views warfare as simply another form of negotiation conducted through different means. "And my people," you ask, though you already know the answer, will be administered according to Roman law, fairly, efficiently, for their own benefit as well as the empire's. His tone suggests that he genuinely believes this represents generous treatment for defeated rebels. You look past him to the ordered ranks of his legions, seeing the instruments of cultural destruction disguised as military units. These men carry more than weapons. They bear the weight of Roman law, Roman customs, Roman certainty that their way of life represents the only possible progress toward civilization. "I have a counter-proposal," you reply, raising your voice so that warriors from both armies can hear your words. "Withdraw your legions from Britain. Acknowledge that this island belongs to its native peoples, sail back across the channel, and never return." Suetonius almost smiles at what he clearly considers a barbarian queen's naive understanding of political reality. "The emperor does not negotiate with rebels, Lady Boudica. He offers mercy to those who submit and death to those who resist. There are no other options." The finality in his voice crystallizes something in your mind that has been building since that terrible day when Roman soldiers first laid hands on your daughters. This is not about tax policy or territorial administration or any of the practical matters that diplomats negotiate. This is about the fundamental question of whether your people have the right to exist as themselves or must disappear into the vast grey uniformity of imperial citizenship. Then we understand each other perfectly, you say, turning your chariot back toward your own lines. There will be no surrender, no accommodation, no compromise. Today we discover whether British courage is stronger than Roman discipline. The formal negotiations end, but you can feel Suetonius studying you as you drive away, calculating odds and possibilities with the cold precision of professional experience. He has faced Celtic armies before, has seen their wild courage break against Roman organization like waves against stone. But there is something different about this uprising. Something in your bearing and your army's discipline that doesn't match his previous experience of barbarian warfare. You return to your warriors and begin the final speech of your life, the words that will either inspire them to impossible victory or serve as their funeral oration. Around you, painted faces turn upward with fierce attention, understanding that everything their ancestors fought and died for comes down to what happens in the next few hours. Warriors of Britain. Your voice carries across the valley floor with the power of 20 years' worth of suppressed rage finally given voice. Behind us lie the ashes of Camulodunum and Londinium, the smoke of Roman pride brought low by British fury. Ahead stand the legions that have enslaved half the world, veterans who believe their discipline makes them invincible. The response is immediate and primal. Thousands of voices raised in the ancient war cry that carried your ancestors to victory against Caesar's legions. But you raise your hand for silence, understanding that this moment requires more than mere fury. They think we are barbarians because we honor courage over comfort, freedom over security, ancestors over emperors. They think we are savages because we would rather die as ourselves than live as their subjects. Let them think what they will. Today we show them what British barbarians can accomplish when they fight for everything they hold sacred. Picture it now. You stand before an army that represents the last free British resistance to Roman rule, your bronze spear raised toward the grey sky, while your daughters hold their weapons with the fierce pride of young warriors accepting their first taste of mortal combat. Behind you, the banners of a dozen tribes flutter in the morning breeze. The red boar of the Iceni, the white horse of the Trinovantes, the ravens of the Brigantes, symbols of peoples who trace their lineage back to the gods themselves. This is not just a battle, but a reckoning, the moment when 20 years of accommodation and compromise finally give way to absolute resistance. You feel the weight of ancestral spirits gathering around you, warriors from 100 generations who died fighting foreign invaders, druids and kings, and simple farmers who chose death over dishonor. Your spear sweeps toward the enemy formations, its bronze point catching the light like a fragment of fallen star. There stand the men who scourged your queen, who violated your daughters, who stole your lands and mocked your gods. There stand the inheritors of Caesar's arrogance, the latest iteration of an empire that devours peoples and spits out slaves. The war cry that answers you seems to shake the earth itself, a sound like the voice of the land protesting against foreign conquest. You feel your horse trembling beneath you, not with fear, but with the same battle fury that runs in the blood of every creature born to British soil. For our children, you scream, your voice carrying the pain of every mother who has watched her offspring disappear into Roman slavery. For our ancestors, for the gods who made us free, the charge begins before conscious decision can intervene, your chariot leaping forward as if pulled by invisible hands. Behind you, the greatest army in British history flows down the valley slope like an avalanche of flesh and steel and ancient rage, their voices raised in songs that predate Rome by centuries. The impact when it comes is like the collision of two worlds, the wild courage of Celtic independence meeting the disciplined might of imperial conquest. Your spear finds Roman flesh with the precision of divine guidance, punching through bronze mail and ending lives with surgical efficiency. Around you, the battle rages with an intensity that transcends mere human conflict. This is the clash of civilizations, the final test of whether freedom or order will define Britain's future. But even as you fight with superhuman fury, part of your mind remains coldly analytical, noting the subtle signs that spell tactical disaster. The Roman lines bend but do not break, their discipline holding despite losses that would shatter any normal army. Your warriors fight like heroes from legend, but heroes are only men in the end, and men can be killed by soldiers who fight as a coordinated machine rather than individual champions. The tide begins to turn when the Roman cavalry charges your flanks, driving deep into formations that lack the organization to respond effectively. Your chariots race to counter them, but there are too few and they arrive too late. The careful positioning that Suetonius chose begins to tell as your warriors find themselves compressed into a killing ground where Roman discipline can work its methodical slaughter. A gladius finds the gap in your mail, and you feel the cold bite of Roman steel in your side. Blood runs down your leg, but there is no time for pain, only the desperate need to rally your forces before complete collapse sets in. Your spear continues to reap Roman lives, but each enemy you kill is replaced by two more, while every British warrior who falls leaves a gap that cannot be filled. The battle becomes a grinding attrition that favors the side with superior organization and equipment. Your courage is magnificent, your cause is just, your fury is righteous. But none of these advantages can overcome the brutal mathematics of professional warfare. One by one, your tribal banners fall. One by one, your chieftains are dragged down by Roman numbers and Roman discipline. The end comes with shocking suddenness. Your army doesn't break, it simply dissolves. Warriors recognizing that further resistance means death without purpose and streaming away from the field in whatever direction promises escape. The valley floor runs red with British blood, while Roman eagles stand triumphant over the wreckage of the last great Celtic revolt. You find yourself surrounded, your chariot overturned, your daughters fighting back to back with desperate courage while Roman soldiers close in from all sides. This is the moment you have been preparing for without realizing it. The moment when all choices narrow to a single decision that will define your legacy for all time. Isolde catches your eye across the carnage, her young face streaked with blood and tears, but still fierce with unbroken pride. She understands what you are thinking. What choice remains when victory is impossible and surrender is unthinkable? The daughter of Boudica will not be paraded through Roman streets as a trophy of conquest. The small vial of poison has been sewn into your war belt since the rebellion began, prepared for exactly this contingency. Celtic queens have always known that some fates are worse than death, some compromises more terrible than extinction. Better to die free than live enslaved. Better to choose your own ending than accept one imposed by enemies. You raise the vial toward the grey sky, and for a moment the battle seems to pause around you. Romans and Britons alike understand they are witnessing something sacred and terrible, the final act of a drama that began with the first Roman boot setting foot on British soil. "I am Boudica," you call out, your voice carrying across the field of ruin with the authority of prophecy itself. Queen of the Iceni, daughter of warriors, mother of the free. I die as I lived, in defiance of any power that would make slaves of my people. The poison burns like liquid fire as it slides down your throat, but the pain is nothing compared to the peace that follows. You have kept your promise to Prasutagus, honored your obligations to the living and the dead, chosen death over dishonor when the final choice was demanded. Your last sight is of your daughters, dying with weapons in their hands and their names on their lips, and you know that whatever else happens, the blood of queens will flow unbroken through whatever remnant of your people survives the coming darkness. The poison works quickly, but not quickly enough to spare you the sight of Roman soldiers systematically stripping the dead and executing the wounded. Your vision blurs as toxins race through your bloodstream, but consciousness lingers with the stubborn persistence that has defined your entire life. You lie in the mud of Watling Street, your life bleeding away with each labored breath, watching the methodical aftermath of defeat unfold around you. Suetonius moves among the corpses with the efficiency of a practiced administrator, directing the grim business of calculating casualties and cataloguing captured equipment. His scarred face shows no triumph, no satisfaction, only the weary professionalism of a man who has presided over too many such scenes. This is simply another rebellion crushed, another barbarous people brought to heel through the application of disciplined violence. But you can see something else in the way his soldiers move, a subtle tension that speaks of victory purchased at higher cost than anticipated. The neat Roman formations are ragged now, their ranks thinned by losses that will take months to replace. Dead legionaries lie scattered among the Celtic warriors, their standardized equipment a stark contrast to the individual artistry of British weapons. You may have lost the battle, but you have taught Rome that conquest comes with a price. Your daughters lie nearby, their young bodies already growing cold in the morning mist. Isolda's hand still grips the sword that took at least 3 Roman lives before overwhelming numbers dragged her down. Siora's face wears the peaceful expression of a child who died without fear, secure in the knowledge that she had honored her bloodline's ancient obligations. They will never see womanhood, never marry or bear children of their own, but they have achieved something more precious than longevity. They have died as free Celts rather than living as Roman slaves. The sound of approaching hoofbeats draws your fading attention to a group of Roman cavalry escorting a figure in senatorial robes. Gaius Decianus Cartus has come to witness the end of the woman who destroyed his administrative apparatus and threatened his carefully planned exploitation of British resources. His soft face bears an expression of satisfaction tinged with something that might be respect for a worthy enemy finally defeated. He dismounts carefully, his movements those of a man more accustomed to offices than battlefields, and approaches your dying form with the wariness of someone who understands that even defeated enemies can be dangerous. But you no longer possess the strength to threaten anyone. The poison has done its work too well for that. Boudica, he says, your name carrying a mixture of relief and grudging admiration. The terror of the eastern provinces. The barbarian queen who dared to challenge Roman authority. You try to speak, to deliver some final defiance or cutting observation, but only blood comes from your lips. The words that have served you throughout your life, diplomats' phrases and war leaders' commands, mother's comfort and queen's authority, all of them have abandoned you now. There is only the growing darkness and the distant sound of ravens gathering to feast on the scattered dead. But Cartus seems to understand something in your eyes, some message that transcends the need for speech. He kneels beside you in the mud, his fine robes already stained with the blood of battle, and for a moment the mask of bureaucratic efficiency slips to reveal something almost human beneath. You fought well, he says quietly, his words meant for your ears alone. Better than I expected, longer than I thought possible. Roman histories will record this rebellion for 1,000 years. The admission costs him something. You can see it in the way his hands clench slightly, the subtle tightening around his eyes. For 20 years, he has dismissed native resistance as the futile thrashing of barbarians, too primitive to understand the benefits of Roman rule. But your uprising has forced him to confront the possibility that some peoples might genuinely prefer death to the civilization he offers. Your vision dims further, but you can still make out the figures moving across the battlefield with the systematic thoroughness that marks all Roman operations. They are collecting weapons, counting bodies, preparing the reports that will travel back to distant offices where clerks will reduce today's slaughter to neat columns of numbers. The dead will become statistics. The wounded will become problems to be solved. The victory will become propaganda to justify future conquests. But they cannot kill what you have truly accomplished here. Word of your rebellion will spread beyond official reports, carried by survivors who escaped the final battle and refugees who witnessed the burning of Roman cities. Bards will compose songs about the queen who dared to fight. Mothers will tell their children stories of the uprising that nearly drove the eagles back across the sea. The flame of resistance may be extinguished for now, but its memory will smoulder in Celtic hearts until conditions are right for it to blaze again. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the sound of mourning songs rising from the throats of British prisoners. The melody is ancient, older than any empire, carrying words that speak of heroes dying in foreign battles and spirits returning to the land that gave them birth. The voices are weak and broken, but they persist with the same stubborn endurance that has kept Celtic culture alive through centuries of invasion and occupation. The song grows fainter as consciousness slips away, but its rhythm becomes the cadence of your failing heartbeat, its melody the last earthly music to reach your ears. You are dying as you lived, surrounded by your people, sustained by their loyalty, drawing strength from traditions that predate Rome by centuries. Whatever judgment awaits you in the other world, you will face it as Boudica, queen of the Iceni, unbroken despite defeat. Your last coherent thought is of Prasutagus and the promise you made to him in his final hours. You kept faith with that vow, protected your daughter's inheritance the only way possible when preservation became impossible. They died as free princesses rather than Roman slaves, carried your bloodline's honor intact to whatever realm receives the spirits of warriors who fall in righteous battle. Death comes gently in the end, not as the violent rupture you expected, but as a gradual fading that carries you away from pain and failure towards something that might be peace. The sounds of the battlefield dim to whispers, then to silence. The cold of the British morning gives way to warmth that seems to rise from within, rather than without. But your story does not end with your death. In the hours and days that follow, as Roman officials begin the complex process of pacifying a traumatized province, they discover that crushing a rebellion is easier than erasing its memory. Every burned city serves as a monument to Celtic resistance. Every dead legionary proves that Roman conquest comes with costs that accountants cannot calculate. Every survivor who escapes to the hills carries with them the knowledge that the eagles are not invincible. Suetonius implements the brutal policies that Roman generals have perfected over centuries of provincial warfare. Entire tribes are enslaved or relocated. Sacred groves are cut down and replaced with Roman altars. Traditional laws are abolished in favor of imperial codes that reduce free Celts to the status of tax-paying subjects. But even as the machinery of Romanization grinds forward, cracks appear in the edifice of control. Auxiliary units recruited from conquered tribes prove unreliable when asked to suppress their own people. Tax collectors venture into the countryside only with strong military escorts. Roman settlers stick close to fortified towns, rather than claiming the isolated farmsteads that successful colonization requires. Most significantly, the cost of maintaining order in Britain begins to strain imperial resources that are needed elsewhere. Germanic tribes press against the Rhine frontier while Parthian armies threaten the eastern provinces. The Emperor Nero, already struggling with fiscal crises and political opposition, cannot afford to maintain massive garrisons indefinitely in a province that produces more rebellion than revenue. Within 5 years of your death, Roman policy toward Britain begins to shift from aggressive expansion to defensive consolidation. The conquest that seemed inevitable during Claudius's reign stalls along lines that will persist for centuries. Your rebellion may have failed in its immediate objectives, but it succeeded in demonstrating that the price of British submission might be higher than Rome is willing to pay. The ultimate vindication comes generations later, when Roman legions finally abandon Britain to face more pressing threats elsewhere. The withdrawal is not the dramatic expulsion that you dreamed of, but a gradual evacuation that leaves behind a hybrid culture, neither fully Roman nor purely Celtic. But it is still a victory of sorts, proof that empires are mortal, that conquered peoples can outlast their conquerors through patient endurance and selective resistance. Your name survives in that hybrid culture, passed down through British legends that remember you not as a defeated rebel, but as a defender of freedom whose courage inspired all who came after. Medieval chroniclers record your deeds alongside those of Arthur and other heroes who fought to preserve British independence against foreign conquest. Later ages will claim you as a symbol of resistance to tyranny. Your bronze chariot and flowing hair transformed into icons of liberty itself. But perhaps the truest monument to your legacy lies not in statues or songs, but in the simple fact that Celtic culture survived at all. The languages you spoke still echo in the hills of Wales and Scotland. The traditions you preserved still mark the rhythm of rural life across the British Isles. The defiant spirit you embodied still stirs in the hearts of people who refuse to accept that might makes right. You are Boudica, and though your body lies cold in the mud of a forgotten battlefield, your legend burns eternal in the collective memory of a people who learned from your example that some things are worth dying for. Freedom may come with a terrible price, but slavery costs even more in the end.